Thank you, Brittany. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to obtaining your CCIE Data Center certification before the program changes. Like Brittany said, my name is Brian McGahan. I am a CCIE in Data Center, as well as a couple other tracks. My webcam's not working today, so unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see my beautiful face other than on this title slide here. So any questions that you guys have after class, feel free to send me an email, bmcgahan@ine.com. Follow me on Twitter, @Brian McGahan. Follow me on linkedin.com/in/bmcgahan. Like I said, any questions that you have after the course, I'm more than happy to help out with. So what are we talking about today is mainly going to be 3 points. First and foremost, what are the new changes to the CCIE Data Center track? Secondly, when do these changes go into effect? So how much time do I have currently now to pass the exam that is the 2.1 exam? And hopefully can I do this based on the timeline that is available. Okay, and speaking of the timeline, this is the first thing we're going to talk about is what are the important dates that we need to know about. Okay, so Cisco announced this at Cisco Live San Diego 2019, just this June, so just a couple weeks ago. And they announced that February 23rd of 2020 is going to be the last day to test for CCIE Data Center in the version 2 format. So once we go beyond that, there's a new exam that is replacing CCIE Data Center, which is 400-151, the current one, and it's being replaced by implementing and operating Cisco Data Center core technologies. So this exam is a little bit different than the previous design that they were doing, where you have 2 options. Once you pass this exam, you could then take a CCNP exam, a specialization exam for data center, and become a CCNP in data center, or you can schedule the CCIE Data Center version 3 lab exam, and then based on that, you would be able to become a CCIE. So normally, Cisco gives you about 6 months for this change. In our case, it's about 8 months. So hopefully, this is going to be enough for us to take the exam now. Those of you that have been studying for version 2 and you don't want to have to wait for the version 3 updates. Okay, so secondly, what are these specific updates? Now, in this session, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because we're going to come back later in the sessions that are actually preparing for Data Center version 3, and we're going to pick these items apart piece by piece. But just as a brief overview, what are the removals from the new exam and what are the additions? One of the things that is not too surprising that has been removed is overlay transport virtualization, or OTV. And the reason why is that the functionality of this, which is to span a layer 2 VLAN, like between multiple different data centers, you can now accomplish this with VXLAN, BGP EVPN. So it's kind of an overlapping feature set that you could do it the old way with OTV, or you could do it with the new way with VXLAN. From the end host point of view, there's going to be no difference. So OTV on the 7K is no longer required, but we're going to be doing VXLAN on any of the other platforms that they specify. Okay, a couple other ones that are miscellaneous items are the Cisco Application Virtual Switch, or the AVE. Actually, this should be the Application Virtual Edge, not the Application Virtual Switch. But those are 2 features that are similar to each other, the AVS and the AVE. Those are essentially the plugin that runs inside of VMware, that runs inside of Microsoft Hyper-V. It's the virtual leaf that we use to connect to the ACI fabric. So these have been removed, and under that particular section for the blueprint, it now just lists that we're doing the VMware VDS, the virtual distributed switch, or the DVS, distributed virtual switch, which basically just means that we don't have to touch the hypervisor. So we don't need to log into VMware in order to install any plugins. This is the big issue with the Application Virtual Switch, or the Application Virtual Edge, that you need to keep track of the version numbers between what you're running in VMware and what you're running in this software switch. So I think just going forward, Cisco's really not putting as much focus on this product, and they're using just the VMware, the built-in VMware virtual switch. Okay, so where we would see this real quick is, let me open up a new window here, and let's go to cisco.com/go/CCIE, and let's take a look at the new blueprint. So this is going to be under CCIE Data Center, and then under Data Center V3 to take the lab exam. And then we want the exam topics. Now, notice on this page, what is not listed there is practice, which talks about typically the equipment. So they're not yet fully done with defining all of the items that they've changed in the new certifications. So once we get more information about this, I'll make a blog post about what are the platforms, what are the new software versions that we're supposed to be running. But currently now, the only thing that it says is just what are the topics that we're covering. Okay, so let's look at this in the PDF format. Okay, Data Center V3 exam. And what I wanted to show here was, let's see, where does it say VMware VDS? It should be part of Fabric. Well, let's just search for it. Distributed Virtual Switch, VDS. There. Under Virtual Networking, Section 2 is Data Center Fabric Infrastructure. So this would be ACI, essentially, where in the case of ACI, first thing we need to do is to log into the Fabric, and we discover what are the different switches. Okay, we connect to the controller. We define the Fabric access policies that are going downstream from the leafs to the end hosts. And then once we do something like create an application profile and an EPG, we could then push this down from the APIC to vCenter. And then vCenter is going to use this as a port group. Okay, but the point about this is that in the previous iteration of the blueprint, it also included the application virtual switch, the application virtual edge, which is the AVE, and then also the Hyper-V switch. Okay, so in this case, we don't have to worry about the hypervisor itself. We're working on this just from the network point of view. Okay, some of the other additions are under servers, which was for HyperFlex. Okay, so HyperFlex is basically a cluster of switches, a cluster of servers where they have the compute, the memory, and the storage built in, but they can work as a shared pool of storage. So you can still vMotion your machines back and forth from one server to another, even though it's using direct attached storage. It has kind of like a shared virtual file system. But the key with this is that this is still considered a UCS server. It's just a different type of UCS server, that it is a HyperFlex server. Okay, then last but not least, we have our management software, which is Data Center Network Manager. Previously, this was always listed under the equipment list, but I never really got many questions from people on this particular topic, which probably means that they weren't really testing this in the exam. So we'll see when it gets to version 3 whether people are actually asking questions about DCNM. But the idea of this is that you could use DCNM to build your VXLAN eVPN fabric from an automation point of view. So for those of you that have gone through my videos on BGP eVPN on the Nexus CLI, you know that it's very, very involved just in terms of how much syntax you need to put in. And if you make one mistake on any of the leaf switches, then the whole solution is not going to work. So with Data Center Network Manager, it can build the underlay for you, which would be like your OSPF or your ISIS routing going from the leafs up to the spines. It can build your BGP overlay, which is going to be for the actual customers, and then it can deal with the automation of the VLANs to the VXLANs, or the VLANs to the VNI mappings. But again, this is going to be for the new certification that is starting February 24th in 2020. In our case here, we're trying to focus on, can we pass the exam before that? Okay, and I got a question here that is perfect for our next slide, which is how bad is scheduling for the exam in Richardson? Okay, you can see on the left here, there's not that many dates available in Richardson, Texas. This is the US site. If you want to go overseas, or if you're already in Europe, then and you look at Brussels, you can see that Brussels does have a large number of dates available. I'm not 100% sure if there are any mobile dates. So you may want to check the lab type. And actually, let me go ahead and do this right now live. So let's search for, actually, let's just go back, and we want to schedule the exam. So actually, let's just start at cisco.com/go/CCIE, then CCIE Data Center and lab exam. And this is still going to the old one, or excuse me, this is going to the new one. We need to get to the old one, Data Center version 2. So let's go to here on the Cisco Learning Network. I think this is what we're looking for. Costs and scheduling, lab exam, and then there should be a schedule a lab or practical exam online. Okay, so let me go ahead and log in here. And then let's check the exam scheduler. Okay, so data center, and it doesn't really look like, let's try Toronto. There's one date, July 24th. Okay, let's try Richardson a little further out. So June, there's nothing. July, there's a couple. August, there's a couple. Well, August, at least one. Available seat 1. September, there's some. And then October, we start to block the dates off. So what I would recommend to do is that once you get 90 days out from this date here, okay, which is actually now. Okay, so the 20th and the 21st, you cannot book that. Today is June 21st, so it must be based on their schedule or whatever time zone that they're using, is that they're taking 90 days, and then that is the limit. The potential problem with this, though, is that you want to schedule early and potentially schedule often, right? Because if you've never taken this exam before, you really don't know what to expect before you get in there. And I hate to say it this way, but sometimes the lab exams are kind of like a fact-finding mission that you need to go in there and see what topics are there. Hopefully you're prepared. You can try your best, but if there's any topics that you haven't prepared for, you know what to do to go back home, continue your studies, and then you can go back for another attempt. So ideally, book in June if you can, July 2019. So there are lab dates still available, but there's not a ton of them, not as many as the routing and switching lab. Okay, so how do we prepare today then? Okay, what we put together for you guys to make this a little bit simpler is what we call a curated playlist. So curated playlist is going to be the videos that we have, but you can just follow them on a step-by-step basis, kind of like a roadmap in order to get from point A to point Z. So when you log in to streaming.ine.com, if you were to go under Cisco, if you were to go under CCIE, if you were to go under Data Center, you see that there's a ton of different classes, a ton of different courses, and it's pretty difficult to figure out, well, which ones do I even need, or what would be the order that I want to do this in? Okay, what you can do instead is up at the top, next to the search bar, you have this little map. Click on this for curated playlists, and then go under CCIE Data Center V2. Okay, so this includes all of the playlists, 113 hours with 14 different courses, and it basically starts top down, layer 2, UCS, ACI, or I should say Nexus, UCS, and then ACI, because inside UCS there's a lot more detail, inside ACI there's a lot more detail, and so on and so forth. Okay, the first of this, the Data Center Transition Technologies course, this would be a good review for the written exam. So if you haven't taken the written exam and you still want to attempt version 2, then I would recommend to start with this particular video series. Okay, beyond this, let's go ahead and take a look at the blueprint, and we're going to map it to the individual technologies here listed in the curated playlist. Okay, so next, let's go back to Cisco's website, and let's go back to cisco.com/go/CCIE, and we want expert certifications, CCIE Data Center, and then we have the 2 old exams. Okay, so we have unified written and lab exam topics. So both of these are the same for the written exam and for the lab. Okay, let's open this up in PDF. And then we're going to look at this side by side from our videos compared to the blueprint. Okay, so we have 6 different domains, first of which is layer 2, layer 3 connectivity. Layer 2, layer 3 connectivity. So let's go ahead and zoom in. Link aggregation, tagging, trunking, and spanning tree. Okay, if we go back to our curated playlist, this is going to be under NXOS. Okay, so layer 2 switching on Nexus NXOS. We have the 7K virtual device context, so I'm not 100% sure if that's even listed in here. Link aggregation would be port channeling. Okay, so we have link aggregation. Tagging and trunking would be classical Ethernet design, access aggregation core, and then just classical Ethernet on Nexus. So this section here, this would be trunking. Okay, then we have spanning tree is likely going to be inside the next course or the next section, which is under virtual port channels. Okay, so under VPC, we should talk a little bit about spanning tree, and it's basically going to be in this section here, virtual port channel overview. It talks about why do we not need spanning tree protocol anymore. But with the combination of that first section, layer 2 switching, and then the next section, which is the virtual port channel, that's going to cover those 3 main sections. Okay, next we have design, implement, and troubleshoot overlays. Okay, VXLAN, we have VXLAN EVPN, and then we have VXLAN flood and learn. So there's a couple different sections on this. We have programmable fabric, that is VXLAN, BGP, EVPN on Nexus NXOS. And then we should have another one here, virtual extensible LAN on Nexus NXOS. So they pretty much cover the same topics. I believe the first one I had released right after they had announced the new blueprint. So you may see some more detail in the second one, that's virtual extensible LAN on Nexus NXOS. But in either case, they're both going to be covering VXLAN and EVPN. Okay, also we have overlay transport virtualization on Nexus NXOS. Okay, so first line items we have just based on looking at the curated playlist. And again, the issue is that when you look at this from just the overall course view, it's a little bit hard to find where these particular topics are listed. So here we just have a playlist that you can go top down and is going to help you out. Okay, next, design, implement, and troubleshoot routing protocols and features. For example, OSPF, ISIS, BGP, bidirectional forwarding detection, and first hop redundancy protocols. Okay, all of these are going to be covered in BGP EVPN. Well, actually, technically not ISIS. ISIS is going to be covered in ACI because it uses ISIS to build the underlay. You technically could use ISIS to build the underlay manually for your VXLAN EVPN fabric on Nexus, but in the data center, it's just not as common to use ISIS for that application because people are just more familiar with OSPF than ISIS. Next, design, implement, and troubleshoot multicast protocols, which multicast is going to be covered in overlay transport virtualization because it needs multicast for its transport. Okay, so there should be somewhere in here. There we go. Okay, OTV with multicast transport is going to be this one. Okay, so implementing PIM, implementing IGMP. Okay, section 1.5 here, notice it says describe, but it doesn't say implement or troubleshoot, which means that the inter-fabric connectivity, this one is for the written exam only. Okay, multipod or multi-site. We're talking about ACI, multipod or multi-site. Okay, next, design, implement, and troubleshoot external fabric connectivity, either layer 2 or layer 3 out in VRF Lite. What this is referring to is under ACI. Under ACI, we should have layer 2 trunk ports on ACI, which is L2 out. And then we should have connecting ACI to external layer 3 networks, which is layer 3 out. Okay, so both of these are ACI topics. And then VRF Lite, VRFs are covered in a bunch of different places in regular Nexus NXOS. So assuming that you're going through just the regular routing sections, or if you followed the videos up to this point before ACI, then you would have seen VRF Lite done a number of times. 1.7 says design, implement, and troubleshoot traffic management. For example, queuing, policing, classification, marking, RDMA over converged Ethernet. Really where these are going to come in is going to be with UCS and FCOE. So the sections under UCS, so implementing unified computing system, there should be in here somewhere, okay, which is probably going to be when you boot up the blade, that it's going to be talking about these different queuing mechanisms. Okay, next we have design, implement, and troubleshooting network service insertion and redirection. This is discussed in ACI, and I want to believe that it is in section 2. Which it may be discussed just in theory. What this is referring to would be your L4 to L7 services. Okay, like a virtual ASA. So virtual ASA could be there in the lab topology, and then you need to talk to it from the APIC. These are the terms basically that they're using to describe that. So I don't believe it's labeled here in the playlist for whatever reason, but this is discussed in terms of the features of what does ACI support. Okay, 2.2 for troubleshooting services. There's really nothing much that goes on with these, so there's no section that maps directly to these. What I would recommend to do is just go to the documentation, so the NXOS config guides, and make sure that you try these out, that you don't get tripped up on any minor feature like precision time protocol versus network time protocol. Okay, they're not very difficult to configure. There's only maybe 1 or 2 commands on Nexus to get there. But if they're asking you to configure PTP and you accidentally configure NTP, then they're going to mark the question wrong. Okay, main difference between them is PTP is more accurate. It could use timestamping down to the nanosecond, I believe, maybe 3 nanoseconds, something like that. But it's used in financial trading networks to make sure that the packets are being, packets sent are arriving on the other end. So we basically timestamp everything. And And where this would come into play for our designs in data center would be for Nexus 3000, which is the one that's used for low latency. Okay, next one, section 2.3, design, implement, and troubleshoot role-based access control. So again, there's not really a ton that you would need to do with this. As far as I know, on the equipment list, they don't show an actual AAA server. So anything that you would be doing in terms of authentication, authorization, or accounting, that would be local users. So I would, recommend just look at the documentation under NXOS for those particular topics, and make sure that there's no huge differences for whatever platform you're already familiar with, for example, regular iOS, and then you're transferring that knowledge over to NXOS. Okay, so that's going to be the same thing. So NXOS config guides. Okay, next, design, implement, and troubleshoot maintenance tasks. For example, backup and restore, firmware upgrades and downgrades. I would assume that we're talking about ACI here. And in the ACI section, I do go through how do you create a snapshot, how do you roll it back, how do you do the firmware upgrade and the downgrade, which is very, very simple process in ACI. You basically just upload the binaries to the controller. You create two different groups. You say, I want to upgrade all even leafs now. Once all the even leafs are done, then I'm going to upgrade the odd leafs, or the even leafs and the spines, and then the odd leafs and the spines. So even though they reboot once they're done with the installation, since everything is multi-homed in the network and we have a lot of path diversity, you should not lose any connectivity from your end hosts that are actually forwarding traffic in the data plane while you're doing the upgrade. Okay, next, design, implement, and troubleshoot monitoring services. Flow, export, span, SNMP, syslog. Span, you'll see this being used over and over and over in all of the modules, where I'm taking packet captures and looking behind the scenes of what are the boxes actually doing here. I'm not 100% sure if I have an actual section that says span, but if you start at the top and move down, you'll see me explain that as pretty much right in the beginning as I go to do a packet capturing in Wireshark, and then we look behind the scenes, well, what really is going on with this particular protocol? What does the encapsulation look like? What's the inner header? What's the outer header, etc. Okay, next, implement and troubleshoot security features. Okay, and actually, let's look at the transition course as well here. I want to see if this has anything listed specifically for security. Okay, so we don't have a section that specifically lists security, but most of this is going to be the same as what you would see on a regular Catalyst switch. So control plane policing, meaning you have a policy that is a policer, and this policer sits in front of the CPU. So any packets that are coming in, like ICMP, if ICMP gets too much, then we can drop those flows. There's nothing different here going on than you would compare this to a regular Catalyst switch, though. So I may be mentioning these features in terms of, yes, you can implement them in NXOS, but this is going to be another one of those cases where you want to go to the config guide and make sure that there's nothing else that's going to trip you up on those particular sections. Okay, but overall, and then in last but not least for security contracts here, this is going to be referring to ACI. So under our ACI course, there should be a section on contracts. Which is, no, No, it must be in the top one. Okay, so you do kind of have to pick and choose a little bit here between these courses, but the point being is that they're all listed on one page. Tenants and policies. Configuring communication between EPGs. This would be the one with contracts. So I think the issue here is just that it's not labeled contracts in the title of the slide, but security definitely is touched on in ACI. Okay, but otherwise, if you look at the vast majority of section, what is section 2? Section 2 is how much percentage? Okay, let's go back to the blueprint again. Okay, so cisco.com/go/CCIE expert certification, CCIE Data Center, and then we want the unified exam topics. Okay, on this page it says what is the weighting. Okay, so for the lab exam, that's 17% for the network services. Most of the weighting here is going to be under layer 2, layer 3, storage, computing, and then under fabric infrastructure. Okay, so we were at section 3. Okay, section 3 is storage and computing. Okay, describe, configure, and troubleshoot infrastructure to support block storage protocols, which is fiber channel, FCOE, and iSCSI. Okay, these are all covered in detail. Well, not in detail from a protocol level point of view, but from a connectivity point of view, these are going to be under implementing unified computing system. So we should have, and I believe this is an issue of just it being named wrong. Well, not necessarily named wrong, just that fiber channel, FCOE, and iSCSI, they're not listed in the titles, but this is going to be under the UCS class. Okay, same as with zoning and node port virtualization and NPIV. NPV and NPIV is the UCS fabric interconnect that is talking to the upstream switch like the 5K, where the 5K runs in node port ID virtualization mode, and the fabric interconnect runs in node port virtualizer mode, or in other words, this is referred to as FC end host mode. So basically, when you take the UCS fabric interconnect, pull it out of the box, boot it up, connect your fiber channel ports, it's going to be running in this mode by default. Okay, then UCS Manager, we're definitely covering because all of this we're covering from UCS Manager. We're configuring it from UCS Manager. We're not using the APIs from alternate tools. And then implement, troubleshoot data center connectivity. So we can see that we have our LAN connectivity, disjoint layer 2, and installation to remote storage. So this is going to be when we're booting up the servers and then doing the install. But in order to boot the servers, it means that we're configuring these variety of protocols, like either fiber channel or FCOE. It could be iSCSI, but either way, we are configuring our SAN and LAN uplinks. We don't necessarily have rack server integration in our particular topology. If you want to try this out, go to dcloud.cisco. I could type it or write it right. Cisco.com. And they have a bunch of demos on the UCS, the virtual UCS, the platform emulator. That's right, the UCS platform emulator, the UCSPE, and you can do the rack server integration. There's not really anything different from the blade servers to the rack servers. It shows up in a different spot of the GUI when you're configuring the UCS manager. Okay, then fabric ports, those are going to be the ones that are going to the downstream servers. Appliance ports, this would be like if we plugged in a network file share. Okay, then we have automation and orchestration. Automation and orchestration was just recently added. The very end of the playlists, you'll see an automating Cisco ACI section. Okay, it's not very long, it's just under 2 hours, but the point here is that we want to be able to know what tools can we interact with the APIC with. So in this example, I go through some configuration on the GUI, saying this is what you would do from your skeleton config. Then you want to take the skeleton config and you want to pull it out of there. You can use Google Postman to do that. Okay, once you know what you're trying to create, then you could use the Cisco Python toolkit in order to push those variables back in. Last but not least, you could use UCS Director, and I'm not sure why that's broken up in 2 videos. There's a 4-minute, 3-minute video. Basically, this is just saying, here's the front end of UCS Director. This is how you log into the APIC, and then this is how you would configure a workflow, which means that you click the button and it runs all of these particular scripts. Okay, so this is going to be under automating ACI. Okay, the rest of this is a little bit redundant here. Data center fabric infrastructure, which is talking about ACI. Okay, so we do the fabric discovery, the controllers, we add the switches to the inventory. This is going to be under one of 2 places, either the application-centric infrastructure, or at the top, it's going to be under the transition technologies course and then the ACI section under there. Okay, same is going to be true with 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4. It's just how do we manage the basic APIC and its switches. Okay, then 5.5, this is the one that was modified. In the new blueprint, Cisco AVE is no longer listed and the Hyper-V switch is no longer listed. So this gives us the vSphere DVS or the VDS, which means that you do not need to log into the hypervisor in order to make these particular changes. Okay, so this is going to be your best bet, is that you need some blueprint, some kind of step-by-step process of how do I know that I've checked off these topics when I'm doing my studying. Okay, so what order should you watch the videos? I would just recommend top down. Okay, start to mark off the items on the blueprint as you go through them. So literally print out the blueprint. Okay, you could say maybe I know this already, so I'm going to skip these particular sections. Just depends on when do you want to schedule the exam. And as we saw within the US, there's not that many seats that are available. So if you already have a valid written exam, what I would recommend to do would be just to schedule the exam out, and then when it comes, it comes. Because if you continue to push it out, then those lab dates are going to fill up, and then you're not going to be able to get in before the version 3 changes. And let me bring that up again. CCIE Lab Scheduler. Okay, Lab Scheduler, Data Center, and then Richardson is our US site. So nothing in June. July 15th is available. Okay, 16th and 18th. So no excuses, guys. These are available now. If your written exam is passed, I would just pull the trigger and say, hey, let's do this within the next 30 days. I'm going to take my my attempt. Okay, so mapping the blueprint to the INE videos, you'll see in the file share the link to the section that I was doing. So once you're actually going through your preparation, this is what I would recommend to use, that curated playlist. I would recommend to use that to map what technologies that you've already gone through. Okay, so let's spend some time taking questions here.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up a couple of those questions. Once again, if we don't get to your question, these will all go to Brian at the end of the webinar, so he can take a look at them, see if it's anything that he can answer directly or anything he can answer via Twitter. So let's see. Here's the first one. If I pass written exam version 2.1 before February 24th, 2020, and 2 years later I passed lab exam version 3, do I have certification for CCIE Data Center?
Okay, so the question is, if I pass the exam and then 2 years later you pass the
Lab exam.
So that I'm not 100% sure on. I think that the validity for a written exam is 18 months and that you have to take an attempt within 18 months. I'm going to say no, though. So 2 years, I think, goes beyond what the current policy is.
Okay, here's another one.
Okay, the question is, I already have CCIP routing and switching. Is it better to wait until after February 24th than only do the CCI lab, as I would automatically get the technology core exam from having CCMP? I don't believe that's the case. You won't automatically get the core exam because it's a different core exam than it is for CCMP routing, which is now enterprise infrastructure. The number here is this one. Implementing and operating Cisco Data Center Core Technologies, DC Core 300-601. So if you have CCMP routing and switching, either way, that doesn't qualify you for the data center one. So it just depends on what you want to do. If you want to become CCMP data center, you have to take this exam regardless. If you want to become CCIE data center, then you're still taking the CCMP exam. We're assuming we're talking about after Feb 24. So it's really up to you. You're not saving an exam either way by waiting until after the change, essentially.
Okay. Which CCIE certification is the most in-demand certification? Data center, routing and switching, or security?
Okay, this question we get pretty often, which is in the most demand. What I would personally do is to look for job sites and look at what keywords they're looking for. Like if you go to Indeed.com and type CCIE, you could see who's looking for a CCIE data center or CCIE security, CCIE routing and switching, whatever. That would give you an idea in terms of what talent pool are people looking for. In my personal opinion, I would say, well, it depends, because there's now a lot of specialization in security, like a red team, blue team. So if you want to get involved with that, that's going to take you off to a completely different track that CCIE security will branch you to. I would say it depends on what you enjoy. That if you like that security type of work, go for that. Otherwise, if you like the cloud infrastructure type stuff, then I would go for data center. And then routing and switching is being renamed enterprise, which really, in my opinion, it should have been named CCIE Enterprise for the past 10 years. It's the type of work that anyone's doing through a partner, through a reseller, that you're going in and installing layer 2 switches. You're now doing the DNA center with the Cisco, the software-defined WAN. You're now doing software-defined access with the DNA center, and then software-defined WAN with Viptela, with VeloCloud, all sorts of other vendors that are out there. But unfortunately, answer is it depends.
Okay. I'm currently a CCNP data center. What is the recent path what is the recert path under the new system? Core exam only or one of the selected topic exams?
For CCMP data center, I'm not 100% sure on. So you'll see that there's a number of questions that they have not answered yet. I think the issue is that they're currently trying to figure this stuff out for themselves. So normally, like this slide says, normally they give you 6 months in advance. I think since this is such a major change, they wanted to get the announcement out there as quickly as possible. And then now internally, they're working on their systems to figure out what is actually going to happen. Because if we currently go to, let's say, cisco.com/go/CCNP, and we say CCNP Data Center, it says the Earn Data Center pass 1 to 2 exams, the core exam and the concentration. Core exam focuses on infrastructure, data center infrastructure, and also qualifies you for data center, CCIE Data Center certification. But does it say, yes, let's say migrating to the new. Okay, if I pass the exams of what? Okay, so let's go back to the current CCNP. Well, let's look at it like this. Let's say I passed all of them. Okay, so data center, trying to get to the old page, which is this. Okay, so let's look at these side by side. So you have to take these 3 plus DCID or DCIT. Okay, so it says if I took implementing Cisco Data Center infrastructure, DCII, it says to earn the new CCNP Data Center, you will need to take these exams. Okay, so you could take the new core exam, or if you had DCUCI, DCVAI, and then one of the 2 bottom, let's say troubleshooting, you will receive new CCNP Data Center certification and these specialists. So they are going to migrate everybody that is currently a CCNP into that program. It just depends on what your time frame is, though. So if you need to recertify, I'm not 100% sure what happens then. You probably would need to take the core exam, which would be this one, 300-601. But we'll see when more information comes out. We're going to have some blog posts that are talking about the migration paths between one cert and another.
Okay. Will there be a boot camp in Europe, or is there an online boot camp which covers European time zones? So I'm assuming they mean for this path.
That I'm not 100% sure on. Let me talk to bootcamp sales, and if you want to send me an email offline, I'll be able to get you some more information on that.
Okay. And let's see, another one coming over. In the new certification, every CCIE needs written exam or only just the core exam line CCNP?
So this is what's kind of interesting. There is now no difference between the CCI written exam and the core exam for CCNP. So let's say we're talking about CCI routing and switching. So if we go to cisco.com/go/CCIE, and we go to enterprise infrastructure. Okay, this is the new name for routing and switching. Same exam, just new name. Okay, it says, what are the prerequisites? Prerequisites are 2 things. Take implementing and operating Cisco Enterprise Core Technologies Encore, and then take the lab exam. But if we click on this, it says this exam is going to give you one of 3 potential certifications. CCNP Enterprise, which used to be just CCNP. Okay, then it became CCNP Routing and Switching. CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure, which used to be CCIE Routing and Switching, or CCIE Enterprise Wireless, which is CCIE Wireless. Okay, so the point being is that this exam doesn't give you anything on its own. What it depends on is what do you do next. So if you want to do CCNP Enterprise, you take the core exam, and then you take any one of these. Okay, wireless, enterprise networks, SD-WAN, advanced routing and services. So A plus any of B equals CCNP Enterprise. Okay, likewise, if you were to go for enterprise infrastructure, this is the CCIE lab exam. That written exam would qualify you to do this as well. The same is going to be true for data center. If we go to exams, current exams, we want data center, what? D core. DC core. It says DC core is going to allow you to do one of two things. Get CCNP data center or get CCIE data center. So you could either take the exam and then take the written exam and then take one of these 5. That gives you CCNP data center, or you could take the schedule for the lab exam and then pass CCIE lab exam, become a CCIE.
Okay. Which version of ACI is in the lab and in your videos?
I believe it's version 3.2. Let's take a look at what Cisco specifies though. So the issue with the actual exam is they don't specify this. They'll say we're running 3.x, something like that, but it doesn't talk about the specific version. So what we need to do, we need to get to the Cisco Learning Network, because that's what shows the details of these. Let's search, here we go, which is lab exam equipment and software. So how does it not specify? That's strange. I thought it did specify before. Anyways, mine is running 3.2, which is a relatively middle of the road release. Okay, I think we have time for one more question here, guys.
Can you briefly talk about to what extent we can simulate the ACI section of the exam?
Yes, so unless you're renting racks from INE or you have your own topology to build, that's going to be pretty difficult to try to get access to the ACI. So one of the great resources for this is Cisco D Cloud, the demo cloud. Okay, so it's dcloud.cisco.com. And then under find content, if you search for APIC, you'll see a bunch of different labs on here. Application-centric infrastructure multi-site lab 2, APIC 4, APIC 3.2. So I would probably run this one here. That's going to be a little bit closer to what you would see in the current lab exam. Hopefully for the next version, they post what the not the sub release, but at least hopefully they post the major release that they're working on, because like APIC 1.0 is completely different from a front end point of view versus APIC 3.2. And then it is free to schedule these, and 99% of the time they're available immediately. So customer demo, that you can just put in whatever, it doesn't matter. And then it lets you know when your session is ready. So about 15 minutes it's going to take to spin up the VMs, and then I should be able to log in. Okay, so otherwise, I appreciate everyone for coming out to today's course. Like Brittany mentioned, this is going to be recorded. You'll get a link to the recording to go back through afterwards. And then keep an eye on our schedule on members.ine.com. You'll see 4 additional upcoming courses. And then hopefully I'm going to be able to help you guys out with Data Center version 2 before Feb 23. Then we'll talk about Data Center version 3 after that. So thanks everybody for coming. Have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. And I hope to see you back here for more sessions with INE.